So, Jacqui Thurlow Lippisch.
Hello, Christopher Collins.
So, I don't have a specific agenda of even questions. I wanted to leverage your wealth of knowledge and what you think is relevant to even talk about right now. I'm assuming it's going to hang around water. But thank you for being willing to sit down and talk for as long as we want to talk for. Not everybody with your visibility, because I've asked, different people, not everybody is necessarily willing to sit down and want to talk openly for a couple hours. So I appreciate your candor. I appreciate your bravery is probably an intense word, but your courage. Not to start this off by flattering you too much, but I do really look up to you in terms of sort of two ways: is your ability to be very tactful and polite and classy while also delivering the goods and saying what needs to be said, which often the inverse can be true. In these important discussions of what's happening with our home, it can turn into arguing and name calling, and also there can be a lack of courage to say the thing that needs to be said. So,
well, thank you.
I didn't mean to start it off by flattering you,
thank
but
you. I appreciate
that's what came to me. Yep.
Thank you.
So, water. You want to talk water?
Sure.
What's on your heart? What do you think's relevant to talk about now?
Recently, what's been on my mind is the weather conditions.
Mm-hmm.
You've probably heard that we're in a strong El Nino. And, people say, what does that mean? And I try to just keep it as basic as possible. And for us, what that means is there's more rain expected this winter. And just to read this that I printed out from the Army Corps, I think it makes everything pretty clear. El Nino currently in place and forecasted to intensify. Climate Prediction Center outlooks show 80 to 90% chance above normal rainfall for Kissimmee Basin and 70 to 80% chance of above normal rainfall for Lake Okeechobee and the rest of South Florida. So I've tried to be polite since I was not reconfirmed by the Senate for my position on the South Florida Water Management Governing Board, which I was required to leave by law. I think it was June 19th. So I've continued to watch the governing board meetings. I watched them before I was on the governing board. It's, a wealth of information. And I noticed at the last governing board meeting where the executive director, Drew Bartlett, and Lawrence Glenn and John Mitnick, super upper level executive people in the district, and Cheryl Meads, who is a governing board member. That's kind of a whole nother convoluted story, but she lives up here now.
She's not our rep, correct? She didn't.
That hasn't really been made clear. She, in the original setup, she was Isla Mirada, and I was St. Lucie Martin, but we're both at-large members, which means from St. Lucie to Monroe. And so I think she's still Isla Mirada, but I can see her. She's living up here now, and she's been coming to the meetings. And so, I obviously feel like a stranger in my own home, but you just get through it. But I'm still going to be, I don't want to say judgmental, but I'm going to be watching, what they're saying and what they're doing and thinking about it just like if I were there. You know what I'm saying? If I were the governing board member there. And I felt like, we're all under a lot of pressure, okay? And the lake is very high, even though it's been going down. Recently, I think it's 6:05 today. And it was up, almost to 6.5. But I noticed that during the presentation, it's so complicated, but the executive...
We got time, so...
Okay, thank you. The executive staff talked about the water conservation areas. So you have water conservation areas south of Lake Okeechobee, and the water conservation areas have been set up in 1948 with the Central and South Florida plan so that they turn into giant pools because they've got levees all around them. And so when too much water is in them from rain or from runoff from the EAA, where they grow the sugarcane and other crops, those water conservation areas can fill up like a bowl. And it's a horrible thing because a lot of wildlife has found refuge in those places. Deer didn't live in those areas originally. They lived more in the coast, in the woods, but we developed all the woods. And so then they ran into the water conservation areas more than they were before. And then the fur-bearing animals too. And, they have to sit on top of the levees because the water is so high. So it's a very concerning thing. And then there's pythons in there now, of course. So the pythons can pick what they want to eat when all the animals are lined up on the levees. And the South Florida Water Management District was talking about how they're trying to get water out of the water conservation areas, but they can never get it out as fast as they want to because certain closures for the Cape Side Seaside Sparrow, blah, blah,
Which,
blah,
do we know if it even exists?
It exists, but it probably doesn't exist there anymore.
Right.
So the bottom line is these areas south of the lake have filled up so much with water. They don't drain very fast. And so even though they're really full, overflowing, or have been overflowing, it's not possible to just drain them out and get them down to a decent level. And so the district was talking about how they're doing everything they can in concert with the Army Corps and the national government to get it, lowered down the water conservation areas. And what I got out of it was that they believe, they were like, well, by December, we'll have more hope that we can send lake water from Lake Okeechobee south through the conservation areas, the STAs and the water conservation areas, because but you have to give us time to let them drain. And I know that El Nino came up a little bit, but they did not bring it up the way that they should have. Mm-hmm. And how they should have is they should have said the Climate Prediction Center outlook shows 80 to 90 chance above normal rainfall for Kissimmee, which means all that water would go into Lake Okeechobee as it runs down Kissimmee, and a 70 to 80 chance of above normal rainfall for Lake Okeechobee and the rest of South Florida, which could mean the water conservation areas or anywhere in the 16 counties. Mm-hmm. And so maybe I was just having a bad day. Maybe I still have a chip on my shoulder.
Can you have a bad day on Finito? I don't believe it.
Maybe I still have a chip on my shoulder. But I got a little bit bent out of shape, and I said,
I thought you were direct. I didn't think you were argumentative or rude. I thought you just were trying to get to the point where it was getting a little bit nebulous and
we need to be
obfuscated.
Clear.
And
we need to be clear. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's just like hurricanes. We don't know if a hurricane is going to hit us or not. That's in God's hands. You don't know what's going to happen. But if you have the NOAA, the prediction center tell you that you're going to have an above average number of hurricanes this year, you need to tell the people that, and you need to make sure they're prepared for that. That mm-hmm. is your responsibility. Mm-hmm. Health, safety, and welfare, first responsibility of government. And I just felt like my own people were, I wouldn't say they're withholding information, but I would say that the public, maybe they didn't want to scare the public. Maybe they wanted to make sure that, we can't predict the future or whatever. But I mean, this is intense. I don't think anything like this has happened since around, I'm not totally sure on this, but around 1998.
Really?
I'm sorry. Yeah. 1998. We had really bad. And there was also an El Nino, I don't know as strong as this, perhaps, I want to say 2016. I could be incorrect on that. But the bottom line is, this is not a weather condition that comes around every year or often. And so we've got a high lake, yes, the dike has been reinforced, but we have a very high lake. If the water gets over 16.5, we're not in Lonesome yet. This all gets very confusing. We're still on the old lake schedule.
It's like Lonesome Light, right? I mean, there's still
right.
There's flexibility that there
Right.
wasn't, but
if somebody pushed the envelope, I don't want to give anybody any ideas out there, but if somebody pushed the envelope, we're still in Lonesome.
Lours.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm with
Excuse
you.
me. We're still in Lours. If someone said they're going to change the signs on the road so that the speed limit, goes lower, and then a cop is telling you that you have to slow down, but the speed limit still says 40.
Right.
And
push comes to shove.
You know what I
Lours.
mean?
Totally.
Yeah. We can't assume that that's how that's going to work out. And the Army Corps has been very good to people in the estuaries and with all of this, but if they got orders from their upper levels or whatever, we still have the same signs that say 40 miles per hour. It doesn't say 20 miles per hour.
Something Drew Bartlett said at that meeting that I thought was interesting. I'm trying to think of who asked that question, but about storage, do we need more storage? And Drew had said that we were on track, that with the EAA reservoir on track, that we could get more storage, but we don't even need it. That was a point that he said that I thought was interesting, especially in light of us getting discharges this year, even though they were earlier and didn't necessarily have algae blooms in them. How is it that we, have enough storage? Yeah, we're still getting discharged on. Right.
I agree. I think perhaps what he meant is within the science of SERP, if everything is built out, and a lot of it's still not built out right now,
Mm-hmm.
but if everything were built out, the numbers would work for us and for everyone. I do agree that you finish your work before you start new work.
Totally.
I've just...
Or you're going to make a big mess.
Yeah. And it's financially, you finish your work. And so I do empathize, and I do believe that we need more storage, but we get the work done now. Stop thinking and doing more stuff. Get it done.
Mm-hmm.
It's been on the books for a long time. There's been a lot of money coming in over the past 5 years from the federal government and the state government. Get the job done. I'm sorry. Like the EAA reservoir.
Is there anything in the way of that EAA reservoir, to your awareness?
It's just...
Is it on
Well, I can
track?
tell you something that I think is in the way of it.
Mm-hmm.
And God bless the staff of the South Florida Water Management District and the Department of Environmental Protection and all of them, that when you meet those people face to face, they are doing the best they can.
I noticed that too with the Corps even, yeah.
They really, and the Corps too.
Yep.
I'm saying state government just because that's where I was associated.
Totally. Yes.
I didn't ever sit inside of federal government chambers.
Mm-hmm.
But we keep putting more stuff on the district and on DEP. I'm just talking about the state. And
when you say stuff,
more projects, they're going to take the responsibility to build out, C-43 on the Caloosahatchee. They're going to try to build out the reservoir for C-23, C-24. That's great. But I used to say when I was, there, I was like, how are you guys going to do that? We can't even do what we need to do now. And it's hard to hire people.
What do you think is behind that? Is it the politics of wanting to have those headlines and the groundbreaking shovel photos? Like, why are we doing more than we can manage?
Okay, I'm going to go right back to where I got kicked out from, and that's just fine with me. The state legislature, they hold the purse string to all things.
Got it.
They hold even more than the governor. The governor is a figurehead. The legislature is the force.
The purse. Yep.
They are the force, the purse and the force. And they sometimes, I think, they I'm just going to say it, you have to wonder if they purposefully don't give enough money towards some of the state agencies to kind of keep them weak. They don't like to regulate, and I'll be straight here, Republicans don't like to regulate. I understand that, but the DEP used to be called the Department of Environmental Regulation, and then it became the Department of Environmental Protection, and then we started making fun of it and saying it's called Don't Expect Protection. And is it don't expect protection, or is it that they just don't? It's like a teacher. I used to be a teacher. If I had, it was a big deal back then. I don't know, you don't hear much about it today, but for max, I'd have about 25 kids in my class. And that's a lot, and I was doing a good job. I love my students. You work really hard. If something was going on and you ended up with 35 kids in your class, it really threw a wrench in it. It was hard, even though it was only 10 more kids, it was hard to grade all the papers. It was hard to give them enough time.
At some point, you just got to put a movie on. You're in over your head.
Yeah, you're in over your head. And it's really not much different, in my opinion, with the Department of Environmental Protection or the South Florida Water Management District. I mean, if they have so much stuff that they are doing, it's exciting, and they're not going to complain about it because they're happy that they're getting it and they're happy for the money. But the money doesn't come in on it's not like they're hiring people to do the projects. They usually expect people to do the projects based on what you have. So I'm just saying, if we really wanted all this done, you would, if you want a road built, you hire the people, the men usually, to build that hard road. Do you know what I'm saying? You don't expect a few good men to build that road. You give them enough money that they have all the financial resources to really doing what they're saying. Jennifer Reynolds, she's a phenomenal person. I shouldn't speak specifically about people, but I don't know how she could do all the things that are in her work folder.
So it's a case of appropriations coming, but not at the level to actually accomplish it successfully and on time. Is that the idea?
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then you have, difficulties like we all had in business. COVID made things weird, like shut down. And then you had, like after COVID, the work ideology kind of shifted. A lot of people wanted to work from home instead of in the business or in the state agencies. It was the same for state agencies. And then it's such a strange thing, and I'm no expert, but I saw it with my husband in particularly, that it was hard to hire people.
Who just retired. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. But it became, for whatever reason, it became harder to hire people. You see signs you drive by the South Florida Water Management District, they have a big flyer on their gate that says, "We're hiring."
Yes.
They have like real estate agents put, like metallic stickers on their cars. The district has it on their cars, like, "We're hiring." It's, they need more people. Mm-hmm. They need more money. Because they've got a city to build, and that city consists of all of the stormwater treatment areas to fix them.
So if you were going to do it different, right? If you got the keys to the kingdom and authority for, some period of time, how would you do it different to get things accomplished, to get it done? Is it just more funding? What's?
I think that's a hard question to answer because it's probably beyond my sphere of total influence. I have never been an executive director or a governor.
Maybe too theoretical.
No, but I'll answer it the most that I can. I think that what you have to do, if part of the problem in government is that it's changing all the time.
True.
And it's good to not have people in place forever, but at the same time, if you have, let's just take the Army Corps, every 3 years.
Every 3 years.
So you spend all this time building a relationship, educating them on your situation, and then they're like, "See ya, gotta go." You get a new person, they're really nice, but you got to start over. The governing board members change out. The executive director changes out. The governor changes out. The governor runs for president, and so he's, you got other people running things right now. I'm just saying different situations arise that make it flip-floppy. I mean, I think the only way they could do it is that the state legislature would have to they would have to have like a timeline that ended up going into Florida statutes and have a full-time person, a person who wasn't changing, like the head of DEP is changing. They quit, and then you have to get a new person, but somebody who is overseeing it, that's their job. It's like quality control. They're overseeing it all the time. That's my only answer. It has to be a priority all the time, not just with, one group of politicians and then it falls out of favor and of course money is a huge part of that. And we've had money since.
With everybody moving here.
Yeah. Well,
that's a silver lining.
Yeah.
The conservative in me, thinks that, these regulatory agencies get too big and all of a sudden we've got bigger issues, right? Is that part of why maybe we're keeping those agencies
that might
weaker?
Yeah, I think
how do we do it without it getting too awkward and clumsy?
The intention is probably very good. The intention is not to have government blown up and a bunch of people lazy, not doing anything. But I just believe in leadership, Chris. And I believe with strong leadership, you can do anything. You don't rely on the system.
True.
You rely on leadership. And
great point.
You could have a water czar. They've talked about that now. Czar is probably out of favor these days, but they used to call, you have someone who is kind of overseeing that and they're tough and they're on it. And I'm just, this is just my dream come true. Yeah. This is not the way it is. This is not how it's going to happen. We're going to work within the confines of government as we have. But, I mean, just think about it. And that's why, again, I've been kind of, I want to say, I can't help. These are the words I grew up with. I felt kind of ashamed of myself, that I got so emotional or bent out of shape. But certain things just really...
they're important.
Really rubbed me wrong, and so like SERP, okay, the I always say it wrong, Central Everglades Restoration Plan, that was put into place in 2000 after they did the restudy in the late 90s, like 1998, and it was the whole project. They expected it to take 20 years to build it out. And here we are, we see that we're nowhere close to being finished. For instance, and I'm not trying to be negative, I'm just trying to be real here because these are real conversations we need to talk about. The C-44 reservoir, the quote-unquote crown jewel that is there in Martin County, part of Indian River Lagoon South. We did a ribbon cutting. It's on your board over there.
You gave me those, by the way.
That's great. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
We did a ribbon cutting, I think, is that say 2021 and then, but we cut the ribbon before we knew if it worked or not. And so now they can't put the full amount of water in the reservoir. They say, oh, that's normal. It takes us time to make sure that things work. And I said, then why did you
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Why do you have the ribbon cutting?
Yeah.
I don't want to cut a ribbon until I know it works. Mm-hmm. So now we have to wait to 2026 and they're not even sure. It should be working by then. We can hold the full amount. So, okay. So we got that. Okay. Now let's back up a little bit. Again, not trying to be negative. We just got to be realistic here.
Keep it real.
You got 10 Mile Creek, which was built 15 years ago or something like that. That was at the headwaters of the North Fork. That also, but in a much worse way, did not function. It leaked, and then they had these stairs where the poor little freshwater turtles would turn upside down, and so there would be hundreds of freshwater turtles baking in the sun. And so that was resolved, I think, in about 2017 by the South Florida Water Management District. that said, we'll take this over. And, because there was a lawsuit, who messed it up, the contractor, that's always what happens. Mm-hmm. So the district did the best they could and, praised them. That was before I got there, to fix 10 Mile Creek. Well, they fixed it, quote unquote, but it only holds a fraction of the water that it was originally meant to.
Do you know what it's supposed to hold versus what?
I'd have to look it up. I've written on it before. It's and so no one hardly even talks about that anymore. And many times during my briefings, I would see at the district, that they didn't even have numbers coming out of 10 Mile Creek. I'm like, why aren't there? What's the water? What's the acre feet coming out? They were like, oh, it's offline, or we're not reporting. I'm like, okay, you guys, I'm done. So you got 10 Mile Creek, you got C-44 right here in Martin County and St. Lucie County, mm-hmm. as far as 10 Mile Creek. You got the C-43 reservoir, which is huge. And during COVID, that all fell apart. And so now the district is finishing that. Sure. And now you also have the EAA reservoir, and that is coming along. It's coming along, but if you looked at the IDSs, the dates that the Corps says these things will be finished, they've all moved out. They're always moving out. And then by the time you get a new board or new people in there, they don't even remember what the original date was because they moved it out to another date. And that's the problem with government, the inefficiency. And I don't know any other way to overcome that except through leadership. And I know we'll finally get done with it, but is it going to be 20 years?
That's been my sort of appeal for, not that I want to sue anybody, but it seems like in the legal realm, when a federal judge, like right now with the Corps and sugar, as soon as a federal judge says, this is the way, this is the nuance now. You can't use that STA until you have done a environmental impact study. That's what it is. Unless
right.
Congress or the president or a federal judge says it. And I don't know, maybe this is just too simplistic, right? But until you're not allowed to go to the east, to some extent, it seems like the entire system, right? And nothing against the West, but that's not who I represent. That's not where I live. I'm very mm-hmm. myopic, okay? Mm-hmm. But at least until you can't go to the east, to some extent, the entire system and the management is built around the ability to go east. So if you really want to see the system update in a way that doesn't include going east, you almost have to, on the front end, stop it from going east, and then the system will update around that.
That's one way to do it. That's one way to do it.
Because as long as that's a contingency plan, it's always going to go east, and it seems like a federal judge is kind of the only person. I love Brian Mast, right? But can Congress really accomplish that? Probably not, right? Like, unless somebody knows Donald Trump or Joe Biden,
right?
That's kind of it,
right?
That's your shot, right?
So, the good men and women of the government, just normal people,
doing
not
their
the
job.
Bureaucracy itself, right. But the people, they are working as hard as they can. They are doing the most that they can do, and they're doing a good job. When the ground is shifting underneath your feet and leadership is shifting underneath your feet, it's really hard. And so I hope I answered your question.
Sure.
I think that some things, and then I'll stop, some things are so important. Some things are so important that they have to be approached differently. Water is one of those things. If we don't have clean water in the state of Florida or anywhere, you're dead.
Yeah.
You
and economy. I mean, pick something
everything.
That's important.
Oh, everything.
Especially like the city of Stewart, right? You're a peninsula surrounded by that water.
Right.
Can you pick a more important?
Right. And, we sit here and say it's important, but we still we can create clean water, from our utilities or whatever. But if there's a lot to think about over the next 50 years, 100 years. And that's how long we need to be thinking.
Right.
And I think that there could be a different leadership model for water.
Give me an example. What do you think? You said a water czar.
Yeah. I think
Give me details if Jacqui Lippisch is in charge.
I'm just saying that person would, first of all, you'd have to figure out a way, which would be difficult, for them to not be taken by the winds of politics. You know, like a new person comes in and they get fired, and then a new person comes out. I think you'd have to form a group, almost like what you do with other big problems like hunger or crime. You know, where you would have stakeholders from all different entities.
It sounds like you're describing what the South Florida Water Management District is supposed to be.
That's funny.
Right?
You know, but it would have to come at this point from our state legislature, because they're the ones who create they're the ones who create the laws, and they're the ones who have the purse strings.
Well, hopefully you become president. Is that what we're saying?
No,
Are you going to make another run at some sort of political
Not right
something?
now. No. My husband just retired, and we're kind of adapting to a new life, and we've got enough on our plate would change than for me to, like, say at the dinner table, I'm going to run for Martin County Commissioner again. You know, I think he would just...
Let's talk about that. What happened? What year was that?
2015, 2016.
You ran against Doug in 2015, 16. That was something I always wanted more context from you on. You know, you'd done the blog post, but sort of wanted to hear your side of that and your experience and what that was like.
Sure. It was the best thing I ever did.
Right
I
on.
mean, it put hair on my chest.
Yeah. People don't realize how hard running for
Oh my gosh.
And I did a small seat. I can't imagine the county.
I never worked so hard
Mm-hmm.
to achieve something and then didn't get it. I just thought if I worked hard enough, I could get it. I could win, and that did not happen. So, first of all, it was nothing personal against Doug Smith. I live in District 1 in the town of Sewell's Point. And if you run, you have to run in the district you live in.
And not to interrupt you, but I feel like it's a point that's not made enough. We're so charged up with, you know, mainstream media, and the political realm is so adversarial. You know, it gets very tribalistic and mean and personal. But it's purely, I think I could do that job better. You know what I mean? Like, I think I could do that. I want to try to do that job. It's not, Doug's cool, but I think it's natural to see somebody doing a job and go, I want to crack at that.
Absolutely.
You know, it's not, of course, it's not personal.
It's not personal, and competition.
Right. Makes everything better.
Is the health of life.
Mm-hmm.
If there's no competition, things die.
Yeah. People get real comfortable.
Yeah. So I had been on the Sewell's Point Commission for 8 years, had a very good experience on that. And the environment was my platform. We made a lot of ground, and I wanted to move that into the county. And it ended up that 2016, the year that the election was held, was the same year there was the worst algae bloom in the history of the St. Lucie River. And but that did not make me win, you know, and I would have, that it shouldn't. That,
it was
that,
good for DeSantis.
That wasn't the point. I think it's good for, you know, I think I was very close. I don't remember the numbers exactly. I want to say it was within 2%, which I think is fairly good for someone running against an incumbent.
Yeah, it is.
Doug had, you know, a system in place, and that system included things that I think are unethical. Sorry, I'm going to say it.
Keep it real.
And it's the way that the world works. But I never really thought about it until I was like running. And number one, have nothing against firefighters. Okay. Firefighters saved my life when I broke my neck in 2001 and fell off 13-foot balcony. And, they came and took me off. I mean, my life is because of the people that did good work, again, from the fire rescue. It was Bennett Richardson who saved my life. I'm not paralyzed because of Bennett Richardson. Nonetheless, it really got my goat when I was running against Doug, and the fire rescue, which is like something you pay out of your government fees, was helping Doug run. I mean, they were holding his signs, they were putting up his signs, I thought that was wrong. And I think that's a conflict of interest, and I don't think that should be allowed. I'm just saying, I think
that's the first time I ever I had no awareness of unions locally until that. We're holding the boots for Doug.
And postcards. I mean, they were like sending postcards against me, you know what I'm saying, in the mail.
I remember you were a closet Democrat.
Yes, that and many other things.
Yeah, true.
And it was like, and so, I mean, I can speak about it now. I don't care. It should all be public. Mm-hmm. So Bennett Richardson's brother was Brian Richardson, who is my friend from high school, Martin County High School, and he was the head of the union.
Shout out to your class. What was it? What year?
82, Martin County 82. And 82. I mean, I remember going to Brian and saying, what is this? What is going on? And, he was just a gentleman and said, it was kind of like, Jacqui, this is the way it is.
Exactly.
This is the way it is. And I got all these men. I'm sorry, there were that many men and women depending on me.
Sure.
And this is the way it is. And I was like, gosh, this is strange. And then the other thing was when the cards started coming in the mail, they were not just against me, they were against other 501c3s. Bull Sugar was one of them. They were very outspoken and made people mad and did a great job at it and changed status quo big time.
Yep.
But they, these postcards in the mail were one after the other. I have them all somewhere in a file at home. But if you follow up where they come from, they're not from here. They're not from groups that are here in Martin County. Most of them were from Tallahassee.
Right, some Tallahassee.
Or a PAC somewhere. And so it was a good, I was so naive. I was just running pure local, 100% local. My name, my family, my work. It was not enough to beat out the powers that are here. And it was also kind of the first time that I realized, Jacqui, you were like just so naive. I mean, there is money flowing into this county that is not about what people here want. It's about what people somewhere else want. Development. It's all connected.
Yes.
Development money. And I do struggle with that. I mean, I know that a lot of it goes back to, I can't remember the name of it, but it's like that Constitution. It was during the Obama administration. It wasn't Obama, but the Obama administration, it was the Supreme Court. It's basically money is freedom of speech. That's kind of how it translated. I'll hope that the name of it comes to my mind.
It was a bill or something?
It's not a bill. It was a case. Citizens United. Maybe? Okay. Citizens United. And so money is free speech. I think I want to say a cuss word right now. I do not agree with that. I think that I have nothing against money.
Oh, they upheld PACs, super PACs and
yes.
stuff. Oh, yeah.
So super PACs, you can put as much money as you want into it. So a politician somewhere in Tallahassee or somewhere else in the federal world or whatever, they can direct money to a politician down here. And then anybody who says that money doesn't make you beholden to somebody, that is such a crock.
Yeah, it does.
Of course it does. And so I did see what I called kind of like the belly of the beast during that time between the unions and the PACs and the postcards And, but you know what? That's the way it is. So if I don't like it, I don't have to run again. And I didn't. And if I ran again, I would have a lot better
exactly
idea.
How much you've learned from that.
But you know what, Chris? Unfortunately, I think what would have to happen is if you want to win, you got to take the money. You got to take the PAC money. And if you look at most of those county commissioners, I don't know so much about the city. I haven't looked into that. But I imagine most do.
This is my hope, right? Is that it's part of why I'm doing this. Is it's right before an election, all of a sudden, you see names of who might be running, and it's often very superficial information that people are going on. And that's why ads like that are so effective, right? Oh, Doug's a Republican. Oh, this lady, Jacqui Lippisch, she's a Democrat. Cool. That made my vote for me. It's very simple things like that. And my hope is, maybe through these kind of conversations or just more awareness of what's happening and what's going on, that people are able to, because even though, the county's bigger than the city, we're still a pretty small area, right? This is not a large metropolitan place. Word of mouth is still very powerful for small businesses and political candidates too, right? So my hope is that people get increasingly, more information about kind of the behind the scenes to where unions in Tallahassee aren't able to have that much leverage come election time, because there's been not just, the month or two, all of a sudden there's ads coming out, and no, for the last few years, people have been listening and learning and hearing about different positions.
What you're doing
and the nuance
here is a great thing.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because I think that's part of why it's so easy to trick people come election time is who's really listening to a 3-hour city commission meeting every other Monday? Nobody. You rarely ever get involved unless it's affecting your particular neighborhood, or and you might show up to that meeting, give your opinion, and kind of move on. So the opportunity to at least tap into conversations about what's happening and get more insight, I think will create a more enlightened base of people locally.
Absolutely.
So where when they see that ad, they're going, okay, yeah, no.
Absolutely. No. I totally agree. And I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want to tell you, just because it sounded the way that you just said it, I am not a Democrat. Okay? I am a Republican, but I am an old school Democrat. I'm an old school
It's a nebulous
Republican.
term anymore.
I'm an old school Republican. I am not the new world Republican. And, all I can say is that George Washington, he feared parties, and he didn't want parties. And I can't remember which, Adams and Madison or somebody, the others, they, in time, they created the parties. But in my opinion, the parties are killing our country right now.
These guys bucked up against the crown.
They shouldn't,
you know what I mean?
So you put on a postcard, somebody's a Democrat or somebody's a Republican or somebody's independent. It's their right to be whatever they want. First of all, it's just like religion. Do I go around asking people what their religion is?
Right.
Are you Jewish? Are you Christian? Are you Islam? Muslim? Are you whatever it is? Those are private. People make those determinations because those come out of their life. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. If we're a country that are judging people on those, like good or bad, based on those things, we are going to fail. And George Washington will be right.
At the time, I think that we were more into that duality. We were more into that duality of like right, left being environment, right being development. And that's kind of all it was. Where to me, it seems like since maybe Brian Mast and Ron DeSantis, there's been a shift where the environment has been it's not just, resigned over to the left anymore. It's, along with development and growth, like there's starting to become this shift, as far as I can tell, where it's more like populism more than right and left locally as well. There's more populism versus establishment, like not anti-establishment versus establishment, but there's more of like, what is the average human being here desire in terms of quality of life? They want clean water. That's a nonpartisan thing. But at the time, it seemed kind of like it was still.
I think a lot of this comes from people not, it's people not being educated, people not knowing their history. I mean, like when people would say that Republicans were anti-water, I would just laugh in their face. I'm like, are you kidding me? Richard Nixon, okay, he got into trouble back then, but look at all the things the Clean Water Act, the Marine Mammal Act, look at all the things, the Endangered Species Act that came out of that time. Look at Nat Reed was helping with he was a Republican. Right. He was helping with the state of Florida during that time. They stopped dredge and fill. I mean, that came from connections in the federal government, but the state embraced it because of Nat, who was like right up the street, and he was always a proud Republican. So all I'm saying here is that I don't care if people are Republicans or independents or Democrats or whatever they are, but before people call somebody a name or limit or try to judge it, make sure you know your history. Do you know what I'm saying? Because the party that you think has nothing to do with what you like, if you go back long enough, they probably did at some point. The parties they just merge in and out, and they'll continue merging in and out. It will be a different party by the time that your daughters are voting. And I'm just saying, I think that, why I loved working for water, why I love working for water, is it is not a partisan issue.
Exactly.
It is not a partisan issue. And it is for everyone. It is for everyone. And everyone needs it. And I always felt like so fortunate that I could spend my life working for something that was for all people.
Yes.
And that is the beauty of water. And,
if you want to enjoy your $60 million boat, and go out offshore and go through the river, if you are pulling fish off the bridge for dinner.
Absolutely.
Like that water.
So I'm not trying to speak to you personally here. I'm just saying on these issues, let's back up for a minute and not say, which party is it. Let's just say that all parties, to even get a seat at the table, need to be representing water.
True.
They need to catch up to the next guy. And we really did see that in the DeSantis race. What was that guy's name? Alex Gillum, poor Alex Gillum. He really got in a lot of trouble. But they were like vying, to say, I'm the more water person. No, I'm the more water person. And that's exactly what should be happening. It's not a party issue. Sure, make it a competitive issue. Have the Republicans competing with the independents, with the Democrats, but I don't ever want to place it just in one party's lap.
Because it's going to get left behind if the other
if something
group gets
happens. This is something that they should all feel a need to be a part of.
Yes, I agree. So it seems like that's the case more recently, anyway.
It is.
I'm new to the party, but it does seem like with Brian Mast, you got probably the strongest water representative in recent time, right? I mean, that guy
absolutely
cares. That's his issue.
Absolutely. Yeah. Brian Mast is doing an incredible job. And, I remember too, because like when I was running for that Martin County position, we didn't know Brian. Okay. You know what I mean? He was new. He was running against Joe Negron's wife.
Oh boy.
Okay.
So you guys are probably nervous.
It was the politics that you can't help. Yeah. But, at the time we were looking at Brian and we're like, gosh, he's not from here. He might not. And then he just showed that someone can come in and become the top river warrior
Yep.
if they put their mind to it. And I do think, of course, politics is involved in everything, even though I sit here and say, it doesn't matter what party you are. But for these politicians, particularly right now, it has been the Republicans over the past few years, you may not win just off of all Republican votes.
True.
You need some independents. You need some Democrats. So water is a great issue because it is for everyone. Mm-hmm. So you can keep the party that you feel most comfortable being, but you can also speak for something that has a bigger umbrella that will bring you the votes home. And DeSantis, part of his win, Chris, was his dedication to water, and he did a very good job with it.
I couldn't believe when he put you on the board.
I know, that was a shocker.
I can't believe it. That was the most hopeful thing I felt in a while. Like, is this real?
Well, I got on the board.
He booted all them. What? He booted Rick's people? Like, oh no! Wow. Yeah.
That was so. For those who may not remember or know, what happened is Governor DeSantis, 2018, came in and he asked the entire governing board of the South Florida Water Management District to resign.
Yeah.
Because of shenanigans that was going on with sugar state lands that was to be used for the EA reservoir. And this had never happened before in the history of Florida. And it was controversial, but it ended up that the most environmental board, I think, ever. Was put in after that. And that was a good thing.
It, not to make any more enemies than I already have, but it does bum me out. It does disappoint me, the whole presidential run, because I feel like it's taken the attention off of what he was so good at and made it, Ron so valuable to Florida, was the environment, the water. There's still things that are, money that's being pushed into the state for environmental, we're talking about BMAPs and there's things going on, but
I think if who's ever running his campaign would put focus on the water again,
I hope it comes back,
as he did originally,
right.
I think it would touch the whole country.
Right.
It's something the whole country is thinking about. And these are issues that I think people want to get focused on, because the ones that we're focused on are just so harsh. The wars, these are real things and we have to pay attention to them, but water is always hopeful. How can we make it better? How can we clean it? And then going along with that, that's the environment and trees and development. And again, it relates to everyone. I think that probably the people who are Ron DeSantis' campaign managers are out of touch with the environment. No matter what they think about the state of Florida, people care about water here.
Yeah,
They've shown it before. And they also probably would in the whole country if they would. It would be hard at this point because of where everything is. But if they had taken it as an important idea from the beginning, I'm telling you, water sells. And why does it sell? It sells because it's critical.
It's life.
It's life.
Right. So with, I'm not sure what the current numbers are, but the last year's numbers were 1,000 people a day moving to Florida. In with the time you had at the district and your sort of awareness of the development that's happening, my perception of it is, with so many people coming into places like Orlando, with so much development happening down south, more and more concrete, where all of that water is originating, less and less ability for water to go, to the southeast. How, not to be negative, but is the outlook bleak for us? If so much, I'm assuming so much more concrete, so much more development up there, so much more water shed happening into the water that ultimately comes into the lake, less ability of it to be, apportioned here and there to Broward, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, because there's so much more concrete, you know. Even with Losum, are we looking at, in your thoughts, more and more discharges as there's more and more development? You know, if there's less and less place for that water to go.
It's a very good point. I think
I'm sure Losum takes that into account. It has to some extent, but it just seems like we're receiving so many human beings from the rest of the country right now.
Right. I think they probably don't take into account
Right.
that.
You can't. How could you?
I wouldn't think so.
How do you calculate that?
I think that I'm trying to remember the name of the development system that they're trying to kind of focus on.
Bieber projections. And
in Melbourne. And it's like low impact development, maybe. That might be it, low impact development.
Yes. Marine Resource Council.
Again, we need the water czar, who doesn't exist, up in Tallahassee, to say, when you develop lands, you have to do it a certain way. You have to be this. First of all, you can't develop lands that are in flood zones anymore. Sorry.
Right.
Done. We're done. If you do have the property already or you have building rights, then you have to build up. Like, you know, like the FEMA houses. You have to build up off the ground.
But then you have the water shedding onto the lower, right? Like me with the office. As soon as that level goes.
No, but not. I just mean on stilts.
Gotcha. I gotcha.
You build on stilts, and you couldn't build parking garages, and you build on stilts. And it is a racket how we have people move to this state, and then we have lawns put on their, go drive down Becker Avenue in Port St. Lucie. Oh my gosh. So they knock down all the pine trees. They're building thousands of cute little houses, but then all of those houses are on the ground, and all of those houses have grass. I think grass, what do they call it? Turf. Florida sells 25% of the world's turf.
Wow.
So it's so we put the turf on there. Then if you look at the plants, nothing against the plants, but they're probably non-natives or non-Florida friendly. And so then they put sprinkler systems. I mean, isn't that just insane? So then there's a sprinkler system watering the turf, watering the non-native plants. They're putting fertilizer on their yards and no weed and feed and everything else you can buy. The water czar should be up there saying, this is where I believe you need regulation. Sometimes you have to tell people what to do. If I'm a teacher in a classroom, I can't just say, there's no regulation. I'm just going to let these kids do whatever they want to do.
But in fact, it seems like from a legislative standpoint, they're incentivizing the direct opposite of this.
They are incentivizing the complete
more development, more people.
Money from the turf, more money from the landscape companies that are selling plants that need a lot of water and they don't belong here. If we had our soils intact and our plants intact, in the way that it's hard to go back what we've already built, but the new stuff they're building, you could, I'm not saying you could take an indefinite number of people, and I wish we could say no more people can come here, but we can't. So if we're going to build, yes, it will be more expensive. Oh, well, that's also a deterrent. People can't afford to come here. They can't come here because they have to build differently here. People should have to build differently in Florida than they do in other parts of the country.
Right. Like in California, you have, I'm sure, some kind of regulations around earthquakes and how buildings need to get built. And neither one of us would assume that we can afford a house in Malibu.
Right. Right.
But somehow we feel like we can just keep packing people in here.
And you don't do it to make it, like I remember what happened in the town of Souls Point. And again, I will not say names because I certainly could. But when I was on the commission there, we passed an ordinance that said any new houses that are built in the flood zones, the AE zone and the X zone, which are the worst flood zones on the Indian River and across Souls Point Road, they have to be elevated. Okay, they have to be elevated, because when the storm surge comes in and it crashes against somebody who's put a giant pile of dirt under a new house, what happens is that it shoots around the edge and it damages somebody else's property. You know, it's better to have the properties open and let the water go through and let it go back into the water. It's a surge. And also, you know, we were trying to promote certain kinds of building codes and plants and whatever. Well, the new commission came in and they were like, oh, that's too expensive. You know, that's going to cost people too much money. I'm like, you guys, man, the people who are building there in the first place have a ton of money. You know, if you can't build here unless you have money.
Right. Do it right.
And do it right. But no, now they've built out. And if you drive down Souls Point Road, South Souls Point Road, I mean, there's some beautiful homes, but I'm sorry, but they're like that thing across from your office.
Right.
It looks like a giant
big old box.
It's a big old box. It's a flat, it almost looks like a wall.
Yep.
So when you do have the storm surge, it just hits up against that and goes around the sides and, you know, makes big rivers on the sides, destroying whatever it hits along the way. It needs to act as God wants it to act. It's a storm surge. You know, it's a big wave that comes out, it goes over the land, and then it just, the best you can do is let it come over the land and then suck back out, not get it caught or hit something. So I agree with you. I think development is a big problem for the state, and I think we're not regulating it enough, or even trying to inspire people. We're trying to give people the same, everything that they can buy at Home Depot, which pretty much kills the water.
My frustration with SB 102, which is that, you know, that bill that incentivizes affordable housing, I've tried to push back and say, one, can you allow for municipalities to, you know, if they want to be exempt, they can be exempt. But even more so, if you want to push housing, right, is moving away from these large apartment buildings, right? These all come with more cars, more people, more traffic, more environmental impact. And, you know, some of the conversation can say, oh, we're trying to fight sprawl, right? We're trying to fight those yards. But the counties are doing the same things too. They're adding the apartment. You know, it's not like we're preserving green space anyway. We're just having everything turn into these apartment boxes. So why not, if anything, give people the opportunity to have like starter homes, something you can own, you know, something where there's less human beings in a municipality, which is sort of completely counter to what they're trying to do. They're trying to pack people in rentals.
Right.
But
can you talk just for a second
Sure.
about, is it Senate Bill 102? So, for instance, does that mean, I've read different things and I'm not sure, I'm sure you know better than I. Does that mean that something could be built like that in the city of Stewart?
Oh yeah. So the whole idea, it's what the city was already preemptively doing over the last 4 years, right? You're allowing the conversion of commercial industrial property into multifamily. So historically, if you were a commercial, you know, you own commercial property, if multifamily units are now more profitable, you would have to come to the commission, submit a planned, you know, PUD. This is what I want to do, like Costco, right? You would have commercial and apartments, or maybe you just want to have apartments, right? And that would have to be approved by your commission. The commission would have a crack at saying, that's too many units, that's too high, the stormwater needs to be better there for what you're trying to do, you know, that we're going to preserve, like in our PUDs, 25% of that is green space off the bat. You know, there's different aspects to it. Now that's not the case. Now, if you own commercial property or industrial property, without even coming in front of the commission, you can build apartments there. But there's a few problems. Yeah. As long as you basically tack on an additional 40% more units. This is going to sound crazier the deeper I get into this. That are considered affordable, which just lands you in a range of like 120% of the AMI there. So you're still talking about potentially $2,000, $2,400 a month, whatever that is. To me, it's just a license for development. But few problems. One is you are sitting on a property that is still zoned for commercial or industrial, just weirdly happens to have a multifamily project on it with 200 units or 300 units or whatever that's going to expire in 30 years.
Expire?
That
in 30
at some
years?
point that
What's it supposed to do? Go back to commercial?
and that's a question.
That's kind of ridiculous.
It's never changed from commercial. It still is. It just happens to have a non-conforming use
Oh, it's so they can have their
project
cake and eat it too.
sitting on it.
That's why.
Right.
So they can have their cake and eat it too. The
Right.
legislators, sorry,
Right.
who are interested in this and getting.
Which if I was on the commission at that time and you came in front of me and you said, hey, this expired, I need a new roof. No, man, go pound sand, because you went over our head, built something that nobody here wanted. You know, you pushed in one of these SB 102 projects. Tear it down. Tear it down. Build commercial on it, which is pretty intense. But that's a position you're putting.
I think this has a lot to do with water.
Right,
Because
huge.
the way we live our lives affects water. I am not perfect, but I have not put fertilizer on my yard since 2008, once I realized what it does to the water. I have all native or Florida-friendly plants in my
Nice.
yard. There's a lot of plants that you like, crotons, things that you'll recognize, but they don't require
Drought
a lot of
tolerant.
water.
Yeah. Totally.
I water generally once or twice a week, and sometimes none. Like now when it rains all the time, I just turn it off.
Right.
And I haven't watered for months.
Yep.
But I think everyone, even if you're living in an apartment, we're all connected to how the water ends up, the quality of the water.
Totally.
So how is this like, let's say
And
that
I want to speak to this too. It's not even just runoff or storm water. It's kind of a conversation that most people don't think about, is the more human beings that are here is more water you're pulling out of your aquifer to service those people. And then even their waste, from an environmental standpoint, the wastewater treatment receives all of the waste from these human beings, and it's filtered, but then what do we do with it? Where does the water go?
Right.
We deep well inject
It's disgusting.
that back into the earth in a different
I know.
strata.
So your grandchildren will have stuff coming up out of the earth.
So the more human beings, the more you're taking water out of that aquifer and replacing it with
Absolutely.
water that's filled with, chemicals, drugs, pharmaceutical drugs, all kinds of stuff that's not going to get filtered out in terms of,
So Chris, we're driving, you and I decided to go take a drive down US 1 and we see a bunch of these shopping malls that don't look like they have anybody in them. Are those the kind of things
Exactly.
That's what's going to get turned into
As soon as the way it's operating right now is more of a crowbar. SB 102 is more of a crowbar than truly what any developer wants to do. Nobody wants to look over their shoulder for 30 years. Can you really even get a good loan for that project where you have to be held accountable by the municipality to document that you have 40% of those units at a certain price? And that price can fluctuate, right? If economically the city changes demographically, now you can only charge less. Who wants to give a loan to a developer to build something where the rent can fluctuate and go up and down based on AMI? It's very risky, right? And who wants to also be looking at a non-conforming use in 30 years? Can you really even sell that to a hedge fund or BlackRock for top dollar when it's kind of a mess. So really what they want to do is leverage SB 102 and say, hey, listen, I've had this parcel here. I've been wanting to do this development, and they've just been waiting there's a few of these parcels left in the city. There's a lot more of them in the county, but they've wanted to build something that's more dense, that's higher, that's wasn't the right time for it, and it seems like every 5 to 10 years it becomes more acceptable to go higher and denser and boxier and whatever. So now they're saying, hey, SB 102, right? Because part of the provision of this is you can go to the maximum height within a mile and the maximum density of anywhere in that municipality that's already been approved. So if we've got 30 units per acre and, 4 stories, that's what you can have off the bat, which the commission would never let you just get. You could never do that. So now these developers kind of want to say, hey, we could build this with SB 102, but what we really want is this project that we've had sitting here for a while that we submitted in the past and you said no. So it's really being kind of used as a crowbar to overdevelop or approve bad projects right now. But
that's still in the hands of the commissioners, though, right?
no, because if I say no to that project, it's not a good project. Now what? Now they're going to do an SB 102 project that could have potentially twice the density.
Okay, so
It's a weird...
It's leverage.
Right. And it takes it out of my authority to say no. Gail took it away from me, right? I ran on a slow growth platform and she's taking away the ability for me to represent the people here that don't want that.
Oh, well, isn't that what they always do? Sorry, I know.
That's what makes me crazy.
I know. It's...
You just subverted the will of the local population here.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's all connected. Really, all of the woes that we're dealing with today are from development choices that we made in the past, whether it was homes or to change our state through the Central and South Florida Plan of 1947. And
talk to me about that. I'm a bit ignorant.
So in 1947, there was a really big flood, kind of like 2 hurricanes and tropical
Is that the crying
storms.
cow?
That's the crying cow.
Okay.
That's the crying cow.
That's a crying. I got to find that.
That's the crying cow.
While you're describing it, let me find that.
And the state of Florida put together the Crying Cow booklet to send to all of the congressional people in Washington, D.C. to say, help us. Our cows are drowning. Our crops are drowning. We need your help. Our little houses around the places we're trying to farm are drowning. So it was a real deal. I mean, it destroyed tremendous amounts of property. But the bottom line is, can we be surprised that a ton of property was destroyed in a flood zone? It's just like, can you be surprised if a hurricane comes and destroys your house?
True.
We're living in Florida. There are hurricanes.
It's a swamp.
It's the way it works. So the federal government by 1948 had authorized the Central and South Florida Flood Control Plan. And that started what we know today as all of the canals and all of the levees that are killing our waterways. They also make them dry, make the land around them dry so we could develop them, which worked out really well. But the side effect is what we have today with our water. For instance, the C-44 canal. It was built long before that, but they widened it, deepened it. By 1958, over 3 million acre feet of water were coming through the C-44 canal from Lake Okeechobee.
For a long time, it was the workhorse. I've heard you use that term, right? I mean, it did far more than the West. I know the West does more now, but for a long time. It was
the primary outlet to Lake Okeechobee and took the worst hits for the longest amount of time, really, until starting kind of in the 60s, it started to be lessened because of people fighting in Palm City, by the way.
Okay. So what do you think? I know this is kind of like left field a little bit. It seems like more of the fish kill, it's more recent years, the 98 fish kill, those pictures. What is it, just that so much more water as it got widened and deepened and used more was happening, or that it wasn't documented from the 60s to the 90s as well and it was still happening?
No, I think it's like the metaphor would be more like somebody who is an alcoholic and I'm sorry to use that for people who struggle with that in their families. We've had it in my family. But, in the beginning, you're young and you're stupid and you're just partying and you're drinking, and it doesn't really, you don't see the effects, you know what I'm saying, while you're young. And then as that person gets older, if they're still partaking in that kind of behavior, they start to get kind of sickly looking, and then anything that they do can make them very sick, or that's what's happened to the river. Its overall health has declined over time, and now it just can't even take a shot of vodka, whereas before somebody was pouring the whole bottle down its throat.
It's become increasingly less resilient.
Yes,
sort of thing.
That's a good way to put it. You just, and your immune system breaks
the muck,
down.
right? I mean, the muck I've heard there's, talking to Mac, he said there's, like boats in the muck at the bottom. I don't know how much of it's hyperbole, but 10 and 12 feet. He referenced somebody he knew that did salvage work, and that there's apparently, it's not just a thin layer, that there's feet and feet and feet of muck that's legacy, that's filled with all of these God knows what chemicals that they've been using, over the decades.
So if we were around the Palm City Bridge in the early 1900s, even after the original canal was built in 1916 to 1924, it would have been 12 feet deep. It would have been 12 feet deep.
And now it's sitting on what?
You've got islands
right.
coming out of so all of that has just piled up over time. And most of it is really from the canal sides. It's not as much from the lake. It's that back in the original days, like 1948 through 1960, they were shooting that water through that canal so heavy that the sides of the canal were just caving in. And then you had the dirty water from Lake Okeechobee coming in too, and it just all carried out. And so it all piled up right there in Palm City Bay around Roosevelt Bridge and everywhere else.
So part of the conversation needs to, center around dredging, right? Let's say the EAA is all built out and done. Does the Corps come and dredge out all of that legacy muck?
Yes.
Assuming we stop getting discharges or we're getting very low volume or whatever.
You've got, this is the frustration with all of this. If you don't change the development and you don't change how people put things on their yards because they're encouraged to, because when they go to Home Depot, it's all for sale, even during hurricane season, fertilizer, weed and feed, any kind of chemical. So
it's tough though, because not that I'm a fan of glyphosate at all, right? Glyphosate is, the devil, but it seems like we've gotten into a little bit of a trap where we've demonized glyphosate and sort of opened the door for other awful, sometimes worse chemicals that stick around for much longer to be used, right? Glyphosate has taken a lot of the attention, but you almost need to pull people away from herbicides kind of across the board.
Right.
Right. We all want glyphosate bans, but
so with all these, with whatever it is, glyphosate or anything else we're putting on our lawns, if the Army Corps or the district digs out the muck, but then you're still putting all the stuff. A lot of it comes from the turf grass, because the turf grass has that. Have you ever noticed when you get turf grass, it has that black layer underneath it? So
rubber or something. What is that?
No, it's dirt. It's muck from the muck fields that they're growing it in. So when you turn over the turf, it has really dark
you're talking about like actual.
Sand
I was thinking you're talking
looking
about
thing.
turf, like artificial.
No,
You're talking about
real turf, real
like golf course turf.
Floor.
I know. I don't remember. Bermuda? Is that it? I don't
It's
know.
not Bermuda. Bermuda is good.
I'm ignorant to grass types.
Floratane. So anyway, so all the hundreds of thousands of people who have that in their yards over time, all of that goes in the water, adds to the muck. So we know this.
Is that a BMAP issue? Is that?
No, it's a czar issue.
Got it.
Because these are laws that are allowed, that exist. So how can you lose weight if you're still eating the same amount of calories that's making you fat? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so
totally.
How are we
in
going?
my world, it's the greenwashing of, you call it greenwashing, right? You put an organic sticker on
something that's not.
Right. It's replaced a certain type of sugar with a different kind of sugar.
Right.
And it's still the same thing.
Right. So
just greenwashed.
If it's still going to be coming into the water, and it's millions and billions of dollars to dredge all the muck out, and then where do you put it?
Right.
And then it's still coming in. So I mean, there has to be leadership.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be a coordinated effort. And maybe you don't do everything at once. You do certain areas. You do Stewart just to see if
Stewart and Caloosahatchee seem like that's where you'd start.
Right, absolutely.
if we'd taken the beating.
But you'd have to, and this is where people just, the government has a hard time with it. They don't want to tell people what they can put on their lawns.
Right.
As a government, you would have to create a zone. You know what I mean? You create a zone, and in this zone, you could not put fertilizer on your yard.
Mm-hmm.
The government would give you money. I know people hate that, but you'd have to incentivize people to start getting rid of their lawns.
They're going to start calling you a Democrat again. I'm kidding.
That's okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I interrupted.
So, no, Chris, you have to have rules. You have to have rules.
Right. Like I can't pour, like known environmental toxins onto my lawn. I can't put nuclear waste on my lawn, right? That's against the rules.
You have to change the way you live if you want your water to look a different way.
It seems like we're waking up to environmental impacts more so from a legal standpoint, right? The city just had that case with 3M over PFOS,
yes.
Right? All of a sudden, the federal judge in the sugar core case is saying you have to take into account the environmental impact of the of that water around the the land around the STAs when that water's in it.
Yes,
that's very different.
That's a really good example,
mm-hmm.
actually.
Yeah.
That's and how did that happen? With a federal lawsuit.
Right. Which I've said this to Mike Mortel, is like, listen, if that's part of the conversation now, which it's never been before, if harmful algae blooms are part of the conversation that have never been before, what about the environmental impact of that water on this estuary? Because this estuary is just treated sort of like a concrete canal that just takes water out to the ocean, but it's an estuary. What about the environmental impact of that polluted water on this estuary?
Right.
Just like the STAs, like, what do you think the environmental impact is going to be?
I think the problem is that in the 1950s,
mm-hmm.
there were people that really stood up against the Army Corps and the government for what was going on with our river. And during that time, I could find it in my history stuff somewhere, it was determined that you can't sue the federal government because when they put the canal in the first place, you gave them permission. Do you know what I mean? Your government sold the right-of-ways to them. They let you do it. And so you can't hold them accountable,
mm-hmm.
so to speak. I think all I would say is there are a lot of things like that. Slavery, slavery was something that was allowed, but is terrible. And so they stopped it, and it took a long time, and there's still repercussions. Women working. Okay. If my grandfather
voting, anything,
women voting, my grandfather was not supportive of women in the workplace, but his granddaughters are. And it was because schools and society changed. And so there are certain things, just like that they put these canals in and it was acceptable, and we allowed it, just like women allowed them to be relegated to the home. Do you know what I'm saying? But as society changes, you don't do that anymore. We've changed. We've advanced ourselves.
And as the damage of past decisions becomes more, as it starts, you become more aware of the damage you're doing.
Right.
And that's I think part of it is like PFOA, PFOS, right? It's on pizza boxes. It's a funny conversation, but the straws, forever we were fighting over the straws. Well, come to find out, the plant-based straws, the only reason that they're able to work properly is because they're coated in PFOA.
Oh my gosh.
So it's something I brought up at one of the meetings.
You're kidding me.
Right. So the better thing for the environment would be to go back to plastic straws, or just not have straws at all.
That is unbelievable.
But they were using PFOA on everything, and they're
So
going to stop. They're
Right.
next year. I think they're discontinuing
Right.
the usage of it, but it's been ubiquitous. There was I won't go into it, but municipalities have been using it in fire foam for forever. So, but part of the evolution of running a city or managing stormwater drainage in the state at large is becoming increasingly aware of the impact of what you're doing on the environment, and then adjusting.
Absolutely.
You can't just say this is the way we've done it for 100 years and that's just the way it has to always be done.
So you need a good lawyer.
Right.
And you need a lawyer who's not thinking in terms of the past,
Right.
but a lawyer who's thinking in terms of the future, and is also fighting for a new way of life, a new way of doing things.
Even upholding the Clean Water Act, things that have been in place since the 70s that just have not been able to apply here because the ramifications
of the transfer
of that
law or something, the water transfer law.
Exactly.
It's right.
The ramifications of doing that just seems too overwhelming.
Right.
So we're not even going to look over there.
And I do. I know you all have been through this a lot, and I admire how you've dealt with things yourself. But I do think that the only way to get out of this is through a lawsuit.
I agree.
And if you don't win, it's just like, like running for office. You go back again and you keep doing it again and again and again and again. And do you might remember Carl Wickstrom from Florida Sportsman?
Okay.
He helped with
Is that Blair's dad?
Yes,
cool.
It is. And he took a lawsuit through the Rivers Coalition to Washington.
Yep.
And they didn't win, but they made progress. And also, these things get out in the open public forum. And so when people learn that you're fighting for something, part of it is just people knowing that you're fighting for it and that you're not afraid to fight for it and that you're coming back.
It feels like
if you don't get it.
It does feel like there's a bit of hesitancy from, I don't know exactly how to define the
it's
group
the money.
Of people.
It's the money.
But it's sort of a lot of, there's a local base too of people who just don't want to rock the boat. It seems like, Losum is the hope, even though there's the flexibility for the lake, if the water levels get too high in the plants and lake restoration.
I think when Carl Wickstrom did it, he brought in 2 individuals. Mm-hmm. And even though the money was flowing from that which was raised, it was the individuals that went. It wasn't, for instance, the Rivers Coalition or the City of Stuart I think cities and counties, it's the same thing. People need their jobs.
Right.
And so if you're taking a lawsuit to the federal government. If you have federal funding, there might be an issue.
Exactly.
The same
Learning
with
that
state.
firsthand.
Yeah, and so you can't bite the hand that feeds you. But it would really be, I think, through a 501c3. And it doesn't mean that people like you wouldn't be part of it. People from the government could be arranging,
Did you see that
powering
we're signing on the amicus with Everglades Law Center with sugar, actually, or with Army Corps against sugar? Did you see that?
That's great.
Yeah.
Is it it's
for the use of the STAs? So they're
Can you talk about that for a
a little bit. I'm actually going to be sitting down with, her name's Lisa Interlandi.
Yes.
Yes.
From the Everglades.
Yeah,
Law
she's
Center.
the next person I'm going to sit
Great.
down and talk to. But they are, I guess, sugar appealed, and then they are part of
Appealed what?
the ruling. I'm a little bit ignorant here, so I don't want to say the wrong thing. But there's an appeal between sugar and the Corps from that case. I thought it was settled, but it's on appeal. And the Everglades Law Center came to the city actually and asked if we wanted to sign on to. We're not a party to the lawsuit with the Corps, but we're party to an amicus, which is helping bolster their case, saying, hey, we want.
Is it for I should know this, but I mean, it's been so long, these things sit and then they come back to life.
Mm-hmm.
Is it, you think it was that they wanted more volume of the stormwater treatment areas for their runoff?
So sugar waited until 21 to basically challenge Lore's 08 because they can see LOSM coming. And if they didn't challenge Lore's 08 over the savings clause and the ability to use that water, then it was basically going to be codified through, another layer. Lore's never got challenged.
Okay, so it's about the savings clause.
Right. So they had to go after Lore's in preparation to challenge it again, probably in LOSM.
Okay.
So that's sort of the war is, and ultimately the federal
Right.
judge.
So what is the savings clause?
I don't know enough
The
about
savings
this, but
clause
the
is
ability to-
about amounts of water. It's about agriculture receiving the amounts of water that they have promised to them through
Right.
SERP.
Right. But
And-
SERP doesn't necessarily, the purpose of SERP is not to guarantee them
It's
water
not.
usage. It's for the environmental, management, right?
I think it evolves.
So it's kind of a Hail Mary for them, it seems like.
It evolves just like everything. To think that agriculture would be the same in the state of Florida as it was in 1948
Right.
when the Central and South Florida Plan was put into place is ridiculous. And to think that water is going to be exactly the same after SERP is finished is ridiculous. Things are changing, and they feel like they should be grandfathered in, and they should have it coming from and exactly how it was
Mm-hmm.
before. And, it's a big deal.
So part of that judge's comments or judgment, I don't know exactly, was you're going to have to Corps, you're going to have to do some kind of studying of what the impact is on the land around that STA. So they cannot be fully used currently because those environmental impact studies need to be done. So that was kind of a win for sugar. That's part of the appeal.
The lands around the EA reservoir,
Around the STAs, just
around the EAA-STA, probably, or all of the STAs.
I don't know which specific STAs, but
I think, this is another thing, and this is hard to control, but this is, of course, another thing that slows things down.
But here's the silver lining for us. This is what I think is interesting is even though I want those STAs to be used, even though his judgments or comments are in a way hurting us because we want those STAs to be utilized fully, you have a federal judge saying you need to take into account the environmental impact, the damage that is potentially done by this water. The same water that is going into this estuary. That's revolutionary to me.
That's great.
That in an STA, the purpose of this thing that is being built is to store and clean up this water. Like, you know what the environmental impact is going to be to that land. It's polluted water. To even have that be, it's almost like Sugar did something on without thinking about, I don't know, fully, the ramifications of that for the estuary, I think, are actually very good. If we'll make the case that, okay, what about our estuary then?
Yeah, no kidding.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
For that to now be codified in his comments, it's like, okay, cool.
It implies that
it's not the only place that water's going.
Right.
So
Right. Very interesting. Well, I'll familiarize myself with it more. I
think it's opening a can of worms, or it could, you know, hopefully for us. You know, but we'll see. So I'm excited to talk to her. She will have just submitted a brief or whatever it is, so she's going to be charged up, Lisa, with the details.
Lisa
of that.
is great, and the Everglades Law Center is great. But as anything, Chris, it takes money to, you know, make things happen. And so they can have, I'm not saying they are or they aren't, but I mean, people have to get behind these ideas. Someone has to help fund it.
To our credit, the city, via Troy McDonald's recommendation, which I was like, what was to give them $10,000 to help with the effort from the city.
Did that happen?
I think next meeting we're going to be officially voting on that, but that is the
great.
Resolution that's going to come back to us. It's like,
is Troy running for county commission?
I don't know.
That'll be a good thing to put on his resume.
But I was really
and a good thing to do.
Okay, let's go, man. Yes.
Right,
so
that's great. You know, and
it seems like we're heading in a direction, even though it's a little different than I thought it was going to be. We're getting there. You know.
Right.
So.
Absolutely. Anything the city, I mean, didn't you kind of want to come in and have a lawsuit right off the bat? I remember you saying in front of the Army Corps of Engineers that you wanted a lawsuit.
I love the idea of Max. So, yes and no, right? My thing is more, we should be actively defending our quality of life and water quality, and not just congratulate them for showing up, which I'm thankful for LOSUM. I'm thankful for them being willing to talk. You've been involved in this for way longer than I have. I'm new to the party, but from my understanding, in the past, it wasn't so friendly. It was adversarial. It was dysfunctional. There was less communication. So I'm thankful for all that. But at that meeting in particular, it seemed like all of your commissioners were sort of, you know, golf clapping that they were there. And the whole point of this thing is
golf clapping.
This is a, you know, you got the kids coming out with the dead dolphins on the sign, and it's like, this is a no discharge rally. They've closed the locks that day for that rally.
Right.
But otherwise, they're going to be open when
you go
back
to
up.
Work. Right.
Right. So the only way the discharges stop, it's not that I want to fight the Army Corps or the government, but like,
I don't think it's a bad thing, Chris. I think
it's just like, listen, this is the only way this is going to happen.
It was
it's the only way.
It was a refreshing thing.
It's the only way it's going to happen.
That you came in and you wanted it. I think, you know, as all things, sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
I get spicy.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
No, I'm just saying any of us.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the lawsuit. It's how we approach a lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
How a city may or may not be. There's a lot at risk for the city.
Totally.
Being involved in something like that directly. You know, but that doesn't mean that people like you who have put so much into learning about this can't be a part of getting behind something that an organization like Lisa Interlandy's group could do, or a young lawyer who wants to.
And that's the thing. More than championing a lawsuit, I liked that idea from Max Stuckey of, you got to have somebody on staff, a lawyer on staff whose job is to just interact with the various agencies. When something like this with the law center comes up, if ultimately it evolves into an actual case because LOSUM's not working out, or, you know, you need to uphold Clean Water Act here, and you have enough built up that there is a case there, then you do that. But sort of like a city of Stewart waters are, that's an
Yeah.
is that was the idea.
I think that's great.
An environmental protection
Right. Did Mac
lawyer.
Stuckey start doing
That was Mac, man. If we ever do it, he's the statue that we built,
Mm-hmm.
because he's been trying to do that for.
Do you ever talk to Alex Gillum?
I've tried. I have harassed him.
He hasn't called you?
I have gone to his office. I have knocked on his
Wow.
door. I've said, please call me back.
Okay.
I think,
he worked for Max.
yeah.
And Alex,
I don't know where his head's at. I can
Well, I
only
think
assume that
he's-
he's over it.
right,
know.
I think he's over it.
He's been through all this for so long that it's,
Mm-hmm. Right. So what I'm trying to say here is that, really what I'm trying to say is that I believe in the law. Okay? I do. I believe in the power of the law. And as much as when somebody says I won a lawsuit, that's makes the hair on your neck go up and it seems like everything is wrong. It's actually a path.
it's the way it gets done.
It's a path towards success.
Right.
But how you do it,
Right.
just like how you say it, is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's the key, and finding that right path. But I think that in our lifetime, it will be determined that putting the polluted water out of Lake Okeechobee into the St. Lucie and Caloosahatchee rivers is immoral, is unethical, is illegal.
Right.
Because it is filthy, disgusting water. And it's ruining communities, and it's ruining people's health, and it's destroying wildlife. And we may have set it up that way. I mean, it was set up long before that, 1818 and 1916, but really it got into place in 1948 with the central and southern
That was
flood
truly
control
what
plan.
drove the widening and deepening of the canal.
That was when the huge discharges started coming through. I mean, they took out S308 at the lake.
Mm-hmm.
They took it out because they wanted the water to pour in faster so they could dump it over.
When you
F80.
say they took it out, what do you mean?
They took
just
it out.
completely removed it to open it wide open?
Yep. They
Jeez.
got rid of the spillway. They got rid of the locks. They wanted the water. The water on the lake. Think about how that would be, Chris. When there's nothing on the lake stopping the water, the level of the water in the canal and the lake is all the same, or it's all connected. Do you know what I'm saying here? And so
pulling it up here.
what they do now is it's shut off, at S308 at Port Mayaca, and then they let it in, and then it goes in. But back then it was just open. They just let
whatever the
it
level
rip.
of the lake is, it's coming.
I saw studies. I'm not kidding you. I saw studies, and I have them in my computer somewhere, from the Army Corps of Engineers, where they were testing 25 million acre feet a year or something. I mean, the numbers were like just insane. Like right now, you can, out of S80, which is St. Lucie Locks and Dam, they can put out more, but basically the highest they put out is about 9,000 acre feet of water through those spillways. What they wanted to do was put 25,000 acre feet through there. But they realized that they would make the whole canal cave in, but they wanted to lower that lake, just bust it through. They may have not even been a city of Stewart. It would have just taken the whole thing out. But they did their little model, and they realized they couldn't do it.
Thank God.
And so, this part, there is no part of the ecosystem in the state of Florida that has been more damaged than the St. Lucie River. None. Even the Caloosahatchee. The Caloosahatchee has been damaged, but it's so much longer. It's not, ours is this little teeny thing. We're not connected to the marshes or the Everglades. We were higher. I mean, it dropped something like, I want to say 14 feet when it goes from the St. Lucie River, from the locks into the river. It is unnatural. It is totally unnatural. It's not like just cutting something open that kind of existed, like a little river or something that was there, and then you make it wider.
It was never connected.
It was never connected. There was no connection. There was no river there where they built that canal, and they built it right through all of the sand and the dirt. There was like, if you went over to the Caloosahatchee side, not to say they haven't been damaged, but theirs was already sawgrass. You know what I'm saying? They were already marshy. They were already, we were not like that. We were not part of the Everglades in that condition. So, Dr. Grant Gilmore was speaking the other night. He's probably in his 80s now. He talks about how there were in the 1970s more fish species in the St. Lucie River than any other place in the nation. 800. The Indian River Lagoon had 400. The Caloosahatchee had something like 225. And why that is because of the tropical temperate zone. It's, those zones are right there. So the fish and plants, they like to be on the edge.
Mm-hmm.
They can go like either direction.
Yep.
And, it seems like we could fight for those fish also if we found the right person who knew how to put together, maybe Lisa Interlandi, who knew how to, we have endangered species in the St. Lucie River. They might just be minnows, but
it feels divine intervention. That I thought that case was over. I didn't realize it was on appeal. I'd kind of given up. I remember saying to Mike, like, man, we should have been a party to that.
The one with the
with sugar in the core. We should have been back in the core and using the STAs, So it seems like divine intervention that's all of a sudden on appeal, and Lisa's calling us, and
it does seem like divine intervention.
Is this really happening? Yeah.
That really does seem like divine intervention.
Right. We're getting kind of pulled into this thing. So I'm very excited to hopefully get to know her and start talking to her and picking her brain,
Right now, Shannon Estenez, who's a Democrat, so you might not like her.
I have no beef. I have no beef.
She works for the Biden administration.
Okay.
In the role that Nat Reed used to,
okay.
Which is, it's like assistant to the secretary for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, or, some big, huge title. But her husband used to, I don't know if he does anymore, but Richard, her husband, used to work for the Everglades Trust. And I would say here, especially as we approach our 2-hour closing, that this is where you figure out how you're going to win. And when you figure out how you're going to win, it's not just through one party with water. It's through Democrats and Republicans and independents and everything. Because you have these resources and you have these desires in both parties for clean water. And, I think that we have to work together to make this happen.
I've learned that already in the commission, is that depending on what we're talking about that night, which agenda item it is, I may have totally different allies than I would, on a different issue. There's no one group that votes in lockstep.
On your commission?
Right.
Well, that's good.
Even on a small scale with just us, the 5 of us, is there may be a night where I'm aligned with the Democrats or something. And
that,
because it's that issue is what's relevant and the right call there.
And I'm telling you, that is how you get things done.
Mm-hmm.
You can do so much within your own party. You can crash down walls. You can head in a certain direction, but there will be certain issues like water, where you have to be broad, and other issues too, education.
Yep. Exactly.
Issues that include all of us.
Yep.
No matter what we believe or where we come from, they have to do with our everyday lives and health.
And my thought is, no matter how you're on the other side of water for whatever reason, that when we're potentially at odds, and you're not on that, what I think is the right thing to do with clean water or whatever, that you just haven't, you're looking at it from a short-sighted standpoint. Maybe you're pro-development and you don't want that in the way, but ultimately your pro-development platform will be served better by clean water.
It will.
You know what I mean? Like,
Because,
you're just thinking too myopically or short-sighted.
Yes, total, like you were saying earlier, which is really awful. That some people are like, oh gosh, where am I going this weekend? And after I retire, I'm going back up to
Tennessee or
North Carolina because I trashed that place, selling it out, and now I'm going to go up there because who wants to live in the place that I sold out? And first of all, that's immoral and disgusting. And number two, you've got to think if you want to live with yourself, no matter what it is, you got to think multi-generational. What are you doing for the kid in the picture?
Right.
What are you doing for the children? And not just your child, but, I thought
their
they
kids
said
and their
something
kids.
that, they were talking about. I mean, this is a terrible visual, but they were talking about, in the war in Israel and Gaza, that when you see a kid blown up in the rubble, that's real. When it really hits you, because these kids, they're just kids. They're just kids. And it's our responsibility to give them a good future, and water has to do with that. And sadly enough, wars have to do with that too. We have to, we can take the heat, but do we want our children to take the heat? We don't. We want to give them a better life, and we should.
I said it to Ed Killer last time, is I was on the way out the door, and my 5-year-old Ella, and this is how cool kids are. She's like, "Oh, are you going to a meeting?" I was like, "Yeah." What are you talking?
What are you talking about?
What are you going to talk about? The river? I'm like, actually, yes.
That's great. You're kidding.
And she says, are you going to talk about so that they don't put the poison in the water? I'm like, Ella, yes, I am. And she, and that's just, it's funny, but that simplicity of,
yes,
so that she can go swimming in that.
Yes.
Her kids can go swimming. Her kids can fish and pull, something to eat out of that river and not have to
Absolutely.
go, no way, I'm throwing that back.
That's right. And it's, that's it. And we can rely on government, as we do in our world, building SERP, or yes, they're 20 years out or whatever it is. But that's not enough. We have to do our own part too. Like how we develop our lands, what kind of plants we put on our yards, how we water or don't water, what pollutants we legally allow to go into these things. It is something that kids almost innately understand,
Right.
They don't even need to.
No, there's
beat it to death.
The devil's in the details, man.
They know.
They're clean. They understand. Yeah. Why would you ruin the water?
Mm-hmm.
I can't go swimming. What do you mean?
Mm-hmm.
The water was, what's wrong with the water? I want to ask you, if any, what the authority in your understanding of the governor would be, because you're talking about state versus federal with, management. Does the governor have the capacity, does a Florida governor have the capacity to, or authority to override or function? You're talking about a water czar and making these calls. Like,
I know. I do not. I think, the way it works is first of all, it's a push between, federal and state rights. That's how our country's always been.
Mm-hmm.
And I think within the role of states' rights, the governor has a lot of power. I think within the role we've kind of been more in for the past century, is that the federal government has not more rights, but more power. You know what I'm saying? And so, again, I think that if there is one word that can change this world, the word is leadership. And sometimes the governor, for instance, if he he's taken a lot of stances on a lot of things. Look at him. You know what I'm saying? And he took a stance on water. Unfortunately, when he started running for president, he stopped talking about it. And I can say that now. And I'm very fond of him. But I know that they're caught up in the presidential situation. Like I said before, I think it would be wise if they started talking about it because it's something that applies to everyone.
Right.
If he approached water the way he's approached some of the other things.
I do hope we get back on target when this is over,
right.
The presidential thing.
Absolutely.
That's my hope, is that
he could make a stand. You'd have to make a stink. You'd have to stand up. You'd have to make it part of your program. You'd have to make it part of your campaign. Could it be done? Yes, it could. Would the people who are guiding him right now recommend that? Probably not. But one day, there will be a leader who will do that. And I think that's within Ron DeSantis to do. I really do. I think everything when you're running for president,
I can't even imagine.
You know what I'm saying? I don't even know that you're in charge of your life anymore.
Right.
I'm sorry. It's just...
There's all the PACs.
There's
and
all the PACs and all the people putting in front of your face what you have to do. And I just wish he could break away from that. But I don't know that that's very easy.
It seems like he was able to do it in Florida.
He did it in the beginning. Yeah. He did it in the beginning.
He was able to override the historical power structure and influence.
A lot of it seems to be money, and money from agriculture and sugar. Let's be real; it's a very powerful and rich entity, and I think I don't know, when you get into a really big campaign like that, like for the president, can you not take it? Can you not take that money? Because who even knows where the money's coming from? It's coming through a PAC. It's
right. All the super PACs are.
I just think that it's got to be harder. With the state, he could focus just on the state. Now he's got national interest, and that's got to be really hard to manage.
Well, I don't envy any of them at all. That sounds like a lot of work and stress.
Right. But I do. I think we've made, if anybody asks me what's happened with water, what's been achieved with water since 2013 or 2008, I would say we are on the map again.
Yes.
We are on the map again. It's not that, yes, we've gotten a few projects done and some good things are happening. Yes, the board got changed out. But what tangible thing has happened? The water's still pretty bad. There's still muck at the bottom. But the thing that we have achieved is we have gotten back on the agenda. And so I just don't want to see us slip off the agenda. Keep it alive. Keep bringing it to meetings. And I think if we stick on that, we will evolve into something that is eventually a giant lawsuit that is a valid lawsuit and can change the direction of this water, or at least so much coming through. I mean, it's poisonous. How can we be accepting this water?
To me, it's with Losum, right? You have the Corps going around all the stakeholders and putting their pieces in, but ultimately it's going to be a federal judge or federal judges through one or multiple cases that are going to add the nuance to the management. You're going to have various parties.
It will be a federal judge.
Right. That's going to have to happen through the legal you're going to have the initial sort of contract with all the stakeholders, but it's going to be the squeaky wheels that.
Right. Did you talk with anyone about what the outcome of the toxic algae study on the turtles in the Caloosahatchee with LOSUM?
No, talk to me. I don't know.
They're not saying a peep.
Yeah.
I just thought maybe government would. But the only thing, I mean, I would think, obviously, toxic algae is killing sea turtles and all sorts of sea life. Mm-hmm. We really saw that on the West Coast.
Yep.
So if it seems like that would be a positive determination, it's not helping them. They're protected.
Concern I've had with the harmful algae bloom conversation is it's great, right? It's amazing that anybody even cares about
right, especially
like it's never been, nobody's ever,
no one's ever looked into
any
it
thought
before.
of the environmental or health consequences of the people here. I never heard that until Brian Mass. Like I never even heard anybody talk about it. But the only concern I have is if harmful algae blooms is the metric, by which we're protecting the estuary.
Yeah.
Then I think it can just sort of pivot to earlier discharges. While when there's still, God
fresh
knows what.
Water is also pollution.
And it's full of glyphosate. It's full of whatever else is in that water. Maybe algae that's not even blooming yet or whatever. I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but it's still the same stuff. It just isn't in bloom yet.
I totally agree.
So that's my only concern about the harmful algae blooms. I hope the conversation continues to evolve and nuance into the herbicides that are in the water, and that it's fresh water that doesn't even belong here at all. That we've kind of got the camel nose under the tent.
We do have
right.
the camel nose under the tent.
Right.
And 20 years ago, if someone would see what happened here over the past 10 years,
right.
they would have never believed it. Never. I mean, we totally turned over the tables in the tabernacle.
Right on.
We did. I mean, we had everybody from the state to the feds to people out of our country going, holy cow, what is going on there? And so now that we have everyone's attention, we just got to keep moving this bus.
Exactly. And
it might not fly off to the end where we want it to be right now, but we're going somewhere. This podcast that you're doing, this is taking us there.
Yep.
Everything we're doing is taking us there. And then your daughter, who's 5 years old, who asked you that question, about are they going to stop putting poison in the water? She's going to be 15 years old.
That's right.
In 10 years. They still won't have built out SERP, but they'll be closer. I'll tell you what'll speed them up is if they can't go east. That's right. But